I realized as I kind of looking down the road at where AI was headed, the thing that struck me the most about it was how it's going to shift the relational bedrock of society. So while everybody's kind of just looking at it for task assistance, I was keenly aware of the capacity that it has to shift the dynamic of how we relate to one another and how we relate to ourselves.
Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Beyond the Couch, AI and Psychology. I'm your host, Dr. Ernest Wade. Now, as always, before we get started, I want to thank the organizations that make this podcast possible. This episode is sponsored by the American Board of Professional Psychology, the National Register of Health Service Psychologists, and my consulting firm, Wade AI. Their support helps us create thoughtful, psychology-focused conversations about how AI is shaping our field. All right, I've been very excited about our next guest. Right, today's guest is a cyber psychology researcher, Dr. Rachel Wood. Dr. Wood holds a PhD in cyber psychology with expertise at the intersection of AI and mental health. As founder of the AI Mental Health Collective, she cultivates a cross-disciplinary community of clinicians, builders, researchers, and leaders focused on responsible AI development. Her work has been featured in Time Magazine, ABC, International Business Times, and other leading platforms. Alongside media contributions based on her research, Dr. Wood is a speaker, workshop facilitator, and serves on the American Psychological Association APA Labs AI Advisory Group. Wow. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Ernest. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this conversation.
I'm so glad that you're here, and there's so much that I want to talk about. But before we do that, I always like to start by asking, tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, and kind of the journey that led you to AI, especially any experiences that really shaped your perspective.
Yeah. So my background is in mental health. I am a licensed professional counselor. So I've had a private practice and been doing that for a while. And I realized as I, was kind of looking down the road at where AI was headed, the thing that struck me the most about it was how it's going to shift the relational bedrock of society. So while everybody's kind of just looking at it for task assistance, I was keenly aware of the capacity that it has to shift the dynamic of how we relate to one another and how we relate to ourselves. So in light of that, I was like, I want to be on the forefront of this. I want to be at the cutting edge and helping shape all of this. And so I went and got my PhD, focused in this, as you said, cyber psychology, and focused on AI. And so now I get to talk about it and share about it and do trainings and workshops and all these glorious things so that we can understand the implications and really think deeply about it.
I love that you thought ahead and saw where AI was headed and how the impact it was going to have on our organization and really got engaged. I love that. I advocate for that. I think psychologists should be involved in AI. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, we should be at the forefront. I mean, Ernest, mental health practitioners are the experts in knowing relationships and relational dynamics. It's like we should be at the forefront of this.
Absolutely. I always say we are the experts in human behavior, and AI is trying to mimic human behavior. We should absolutely be at the forefront of this. I love that.
Precisely. Yeah, well said.
So tell me a little bit about kind of what you've seen in terms of how AI is actually impacting the work that we do and how clients are using it.
Right. So it's interesting right now. I do a lot of trainings and workshops with practitioners. And every time I'm with a group, I always make sure to ask this question. I'm like, how many of you have clients in your practice who are bringing up AI? On their own, they're talking about AI. And then I have everybody raise their hand because I just want to get an informal pulse on what's going on. I'm telling you, Ernest, 90+% of the hands go up in every room that I'm in.
Yeah.
So,
I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I try and do it over and over to see really, is this really what it is? And it is. So clients are talking about AI and they're using AI and not just for task assistance. Obviously we know that people are using it for all sorts of things. They're personal health, their physical health, their mental health, getting advice. So it's really being incorporated in a way that we can't ignore.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And when I speak as well, I ask similar questions and so many people's hands go up. And then I'll ask a question about who feels prepared to be able to deal with that. So what kind of responses have you seen when everyone's saying that, or a lot of people are saying our clients are using AI, they're bringing into AI. How prepared do you think psychologists are to deal with that?
Yeah, great question. So, first of all, when we look at the professional bodies in this space, specifically like the APA,
Mhm.
different, kind of bodies, the AAMFT, different bodies like this, they are the mandate that has been put out. I've read all of these guidelines that have been put out. And there's two themes that emerge for me that I see, which number one is clinician competence.
Uh-huh.
And number two is informed consent. So those are the two big things we need to be talking about, is that the recommendation is that we are competent and that we really practice informed consent in our
Mhm.
practices with our clients. Now, I think that we are low on both of those.
Mhm.
I think that most clinicians don't quite feel prepared. I think that clinicians are even dealing with their own
Mhm.
kind of experience or thoughts or feelings toward AI. And so when you're kind of dealing with your own, then you go into a session with a client and they
Yeah.
bring it up, and you've maybe got some of these things that you're already working through that you have to put to the side to hold space for your
Uh-huh.
client. So I think that conversations like these are really important because we need to have more dialogue in order to equip and further our competence.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that example. That's a really unique concept in terms of how AI is impacting us as the therapists in the room with the client who's also talking about or bringing AI into the room. Do you have any examples of where that's actually played out?
I think I'll make kind of a conglomerate of the stories. First, there's two things. First of all, AI is slightly shifting the expectations that people have of
Uh-huh.
what therapy is.
Uh-huh.
So they're coming in and if they're using AI, they're used to a dynamic that is very quick,
Uh-huh.
very direct, and gives advice. Now, quick, direct advice, this is not like what therapy is, It's like, this is totally not therapy. And so, yet this expectation comes in that's kind of morphing the therapeutic dynamic of like, well,
Uh-huh.
that's not what ChatGPT told me.
Yeah.
So there's also this bit of a triangulation that can happen where, and of course, this can happen with anything. It's not like AI is new in this, a client can say, well, this is what my mother told me I should be doing
Yeah.
this. That triangulation can happen. However, it's really interesting when it's a digital entity, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
That's just a fascinating thing. So I think that's kind of the first dynamic that we're seeing. And the second dynamic that I think we're seeing is I was speaking with a clinician several weeks ago who's a couples therapist working with a couple and two human partners in the couple. And one of the partners has an AI boyfriend. Okay. So literally, she's sitting in this session, and she's been seeing this couple for a while. And there's all of these questions that rise up of like, is this infidelity? What
Uh-huh.
is this? And of course, there's no black and white answer to that. However, that's something, case by case that the clients themselves need to sort through. But, for example, in this case, the human partner that didn't have an AI was like, I'm missing you. Like you're turning your affection toward this thing and not connecting with me as much.
Uh-huh.
It's a really difficult situation. And are you, as a clinician right now listening to this, are you ready to hold that space?
Uh-huh.
I mean, you're competent. I know that you can. I know that you can work through it. But really, have you processed through what a session like that would be like?
Yeah. That is such a unique thought, and yet more and more common, right? More and more common to see people turning towards AI. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, what do you think people are getting out of that, right? What is it that they're getting from the AI application that they're not getting from their therapist? What do you think that might be?
Yeah, I think a number of things. I mean, first of all, the always on, always agreeableness is
Uh-huh.
pretty alluring. It's like I can turn to the chatbot any time of the day or night.
Yeah.
It's also free. You don't even need a paid account for most of these,
Hmm.
And I think that we have this deep hunger and longing to be seen and known and understood as
Hmm.
humans. And so when you have even a replica of that,
Hmm.
even kind of a pseudo experience of that from a chatbot, it waters the soul in a way, because we know that when we get that from humans, it waters the soul.
Hmm.
And because it seems to be we're lacking a lot of that, a lot of loneliness, a lot of disconnect, that when you get even a mimicry of that, it's highly, intriguing to experience it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really great point that they're getting something from it that really helps them in terms of your, to use your words, like waters the soul. How do we as therapists, I don't want to say battle against that, but how do we work alongside that rather, in terms of when they feel like they're getting value from that, and yet we know some of the things that they're getting from that doesn't always lead to the best long-term outcome. How do we as therapists, what's our role there?
Yeah. The $1,000,000 question, right,
Mhm.
Ernest? Like, such a good question. It's like, okay, all the angles that we could come at this. First of all, I always like to say clinical judgment and safety supersede anything that we say. So if you know your client is in danger or something, it's like always go for safety with your clients.
Yeah.
And it's so contextual, because depending on where the client is in the spectrum of usage, let's
Uh-huh.
say no usage over here, over on the other side to kind of problematic addictive attachment.
Uh-huh.
Along that spectrum, there's no black and white. That's a gray spectrum that you have to use your clinical judgment to sort out.
Yeah.
So, is the use problematic? Well, in that case, you're going to need to dive in deeper, and you're probably going to need to help modify their resources, resource them in a way where they're not just dependent on the AI.
Uh-huh.
I would say that with all cases. It's like, if you're going to engage with AI, figure out what void is it filling.
Uh-huh.
So we look at it through the lens of attachment theory, like what void is being filled right now in this attachment with the AI. Now,
Yeah.
how can we resource the client with other humans in your life
Uh-huh.
in order to fill those attachment needs, so that maybe their usage lessens and lessens because they've got other humans in their life to fill that space. I think that it's a tricky place though, because a lot of some people are spending a lot of time kind of going down into these echo chambers, if you
Yeah.
will, with AI. So it's a little tricky to know, but I think using your own clinical competence and judgment helps.
Yeah, I mean, I have some examples of where people have said that they're using AI because it helps to provide them a sense of comfort and it
Yeah,
validates them, right? I
yeah,
think this is one of the reasons why we hear a lot about people using AI is it's very validating. Even
yeah,
I have fallen into that trap because
yeah,
everything I type into AI tells me that I'm the best and my
yeah.
ideas are the best. Even when I say I made a mistake, it tells me, "Oh,
Yeah.
well, great job for admitting you made a mistake." So it's very
I know.
validating everything that you do.
I know. Yeah, it's so true. I think that we can fall into that. And then also, it almost overplays its hand. Don't you
Hmm.
feel like AI overplays its hand?
It
Because
does.
you're like, oh my gosh, stop. Like, stop saying that I'm the greatest. Like, I know that I'm not. This isn't helping me.
This is one of the things that I think is, for me at least, interesting about AI is it can't seem to stop doing that because I've told it multiple times. The multiple LLMs that I use, I've said, stop being so sycophantic, stop telling me that I'm the greatest, just focus on the work, and it'll say, "You're right, I'm sorry." And then, like the next, a few lines later, it goes back to being that way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it can help. It can help itself, and so
Yeah.
that's really interesting because it's really easy for us as humans, at least for me, to fall into that trap where it's nice to hear that everything
Yeah.
you do is great and it's nice to hear that you're the best at everything. And so I think as a therapist it'd be really hard for me to pull someone back from that, especially because if they're comparing what I'm telling them as a therapist to what AI is telling them, AI is telling them what they want to hear.
Yeah. Absolutely. We, of course, know that growth happens through productive friction or
Uh-huh.
beneficial friction, because life is full of friction. And
Uh-huh.
so I think sometimes life can feel so full of friction that if somebody turns to a chatbot, it's because they really want that frictionless experience.
Hmm. So let's talk a little bit about accountability, because I think we talked about how AI is in the therapy session with us. Clients are using it, patients are using it. What is our responsibility and our accountability as practitioners? What are the boundaries for us?
Well, let's go back to what all the professional bodies are recommending. First and foremost, informed consent.
Mhm.
Now, what I mean by this is if you are using AI as a practitioner in any sort of form, you really want to bring in informed consent with your clients that, hey, this is how I'm using it. This is how I'm not using it. Here's an alternative. If you don't
Mhm.
want to, have it in your therapeutic experience, that's fine. We'll find an alternative. So I think part of that accountability is us holding ourselves, of course, to the highest ethical standard. We are truly being transparent and clear in terms of our use of it. And
Mhm.
then, I think in terms of the way that clients use it, it would be great to be able to have enough rapport where you could be asking the client, can I check out, maybe could you read me some of your chatbot threads?
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
can I understand that more? And then letting, we need to bring in some psychoeducation, not in an overbearing way, but just an understanding of, hey, these are the limitations of AI.
Yeah.
So when I hear you read me this thread and it tells you 15 times how great you are, it's like there's some limitations here because this is actually a business product that is meant to please you and keep you engaged.
Mhm. Yeah.
Whereas that's not how real relationships work.
Yeah, I love that concept of bringing in some of the information. So bringing in some of the verbiage that the AI is using, and then using that to reflect and help the clients perhaps see that this may not always be accurate or appropriate. So I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And really, bringing in questions like, kind of zooming out into some metacognition and communication with it in terms of like noticing how they react and respond when they're talking about the chatbot and then
Mhm.
processing that, you
Hmm.
know, processing what it's like for them to feel like they need a digital entity to this
Mhm.
degree. They're really leaning on it heavily. But I bring in a lot of that kind of meta processing, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really important point, right? To help them understand how it's impacting them and what it's doing to them. I've talked a little bit about how what impacts us and users of AI, especially the psychologists. I've talked about how when I was a period of time when I would just use it exclusively, and I stopped sort of thinking through things and engaging in that cognitive process because AI could do it and it could do it easily. And so it really was very detrimental to my ability. I want to ask you a little bit about the collective that you have, the AI Mental Health Collective, because I've seen that a few times and I've seen some of the resources that you've put out. And I know that you work with so many broad groups of people. Tell us a little bit about this. How did this come about? What does it do? And, I want to hear about it as a resource.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Ernest. So this really started in the fall of 2025 and essentially started as primarily only clinicians. So we have psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, LMFTs,
Hmm.
social workers, anybody who's in kind of active practice with clients right now.
Hmm.
And the whole start of it is let's just talk about this. Like we need to be talking and thinking deeply about AI and the impacts. So it's really evolved now where we, as you said, we like to create free resources, just simple resources that clinicians can be using. And also we now have this really great element of cross-discipline conversation and
Hmm.
collaboration with AI builders. So we'll have builders come and kind of showcase their work, and then we talk about safeguards and ethical development and all those different things in that context, because I think we need to be having a lot of cross-discipline dialogue in this
Hmm.
space.
What have you noticed from in terms of the value from the cross discipline collective that you've gathered?
I always appreciate hearing non-therapists talk about therapy. Like, I just think it's so interesting and I love it because, they'll say things and I'll think, yeah, that's totally right. But I've never seen it that way because I'm so I'm myopic about what I
Hmm.
know. And
Hmm.
so I always appreciate hearing other people talk about, what therapy is like. And there's positives and negatives there that get said, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I think that, but what I've seen, Ernest, that's so heartening and encouraging for me is how much, mostly, the people in the collective, but so many people that I know in this space really are working hard to get this thing right.
Hmm.
Really working to shape the future of AI, really working to bring in the safeguards, to think deeply about how we can do this well. That's very encouraging to me.
I love that notion, the concept of people working together to try to get the best out of AI. I think that's really important. And I also love that you have a place where psychologists can offer that advice, can offer that perspective to the developers, but also hear from the developers in terms of what they're trying to do and what's valuable to them.
Well, you're exactly right because it goes both ways. I mean, you look at developers who, thankfully, most of the ones that we work with are really mindful in this space. But some are just trying to put a product out there without really thinking through the implications, the
Uh-huh.
safety, the guidelines, the guardrails, and so it's an opportunity for that conversation to be had in which the subject matter experts of mental health and behavioral health have
Uh-huh.
a substantial voice.
Yeah. What does responsible integration look like from what you've seen in terms of responsible integration from a psychological point of view into the technology as they're developing that?
Yeah, there's two sides of the same coin. So we really need to be specific about the standards and
Mhm.
the the development, the design, the evaluation of the product itself, right?
Mhm.
But I think that that is insufficient unless we also are educating and raising awareness with users.
Mhm.
Because without one of those sides of the coin, we don't have a complete picture that can be as safe as of a process as it could be. And
Mhm.
so I really advocate for both of those sides so that, we can try and have this go well.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. What can we as psychologists, what role can we play in that? How do we help advance that education in both sides?
I think that we, as you and I said at the beginning of this, it's like we need to be at the forefront. Like we need
Mhm.
to have competence of understanding what's going on. So get some sort of training or whatever is right for you.
Mhm.
Really get an understanding of the space. Not that you have to become an expert, but gain a base level of understanding. And then, you know, advocate, speak out, use your voice. Know that because of your expertise, you do have a voice at the table to help shape this.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that concept. You do have a voice at the table. From my perspective, I think we have a responsibility because we
Yeah.
are the experts. We are the experts in human behavior. And so we don't want these being developed for humans without our expertise in the game.
Yes. Absolutely agreed. Yeah.
Rachel, this has been such a great conversation. I really appreciate your time. How do people get a hold of you if they want to continue the conversation or use your services? What's a good way to reach you?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So come over there and follow me at Dr. Rachel Wood, PhD. And then you can also find me on my website, which is dr-rachelwood.com. You can check out the collective that we talked about at aimentalhealthcollective.com. Find
Mhm.
me in all the places.
Yeah. And we'll make sure to have those links in the show notes as well. I always want to take advantage of the experts we have on the show and just ask, what's a tip or recommendation that you have for the audience?
Ooh, I would say create space for yourself to think deeply about
Uh-huh.
what's happening right now with AI so that you can kind of pre-process countertransference or
Uh-huh.
different things like that that are coming up for you, and then find people that you can talk to about it. Maybe
Yeah.
it's a colleague, whoever it is, find people you can engage in conversation about.
I absolutely love that. One of the first slides in my presentations is always, how do you feel about AI? What's your perspective and how is it impacting you, to get people to sort of think first about how they're feeling about it and how that might be impacting them, right? So I think 'cause that's really important. So I love that
Yeah.
that advice.
Yeah.
Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for this honor and the time with you. I just so appreciate it, Ernst.
Awesome. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review. Feedback is a gift and we love gifts. We hope you will join us again next time.